Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kathy Boyer-Schussel, Project Coordinator for KC Communities for All Ages, an initiative of the Mid-America Regional Council. It's a program that's designed to help prepare the Kansas City region for the dramatic increase of older residents over the next several decades. One of our focus areas over the past several years, particularly related to housing to support successful aging in place, is universal design. Many of you have attended previous workshops, and today's webinar is in response to expressed interest in universal design and affordable housing. To help set the stage, we have several slides to remind us of this demographic shift. The U.S. Census Bureau projects in 2034, older adults will outnumber those age 5 and younger for the first time in U.S. history. That's just a little over a decade from now. On a statewide level, this slide shows a projection from 2010 to 2030 in the state of Kansas, showing counties that are in yellow or gold that will have a 25% or greater number of residents age 65 plus, and the same depiction for Missouri. Next slide for Missouri. Both maps show a dramatic illustration of this demographic shift. Next slide. On the 9-county regional level, an overall percentage change of just over a 90% increase. Most of our local jurisdictions will experience similar increases in the number of their older residents. And of course, everyone is aging. Millennials, who outnumber boomers by several million, will begin turning 65 in the not too distant future. Surveys conducted over the past several years consistently reveal the majority of older adults wish to remain in their own homes or in intergenerational neighborhoods, living in houses that support their evolving needs. We hope today's webinar will further our understanding of actions that can be taken to support affordable aging in place. And the homes in which we live are truly fundamental to our ability to successfully age in place. It's my pleasure to now introduce Richard Duncan, Executive Director, R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute. Many of you are familiar with Richard as he's presented on a number of MARC-sponsored workshops on universal design. Richard will provide framing remarks for today's webinar and introduce all of our presenters. Take it away, Richard.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to say that I'm really happy to be working with Mark again to talk about these important topics, including affordable housing for older adults as part of this ongoing conversation. We have for you today, and you're seeing a regular screen? Yeah. Okay. We have for you today a very dangerous housing forum. We have 9 individuals from 9 different organizations represented here. So we're really crossing our fingers that all the technology will work well, and it'll all work out fine. I'm sure it will. We're very happy to have all of them. I'm sure we'll do all the juggling that we need to do to have it be successful. Today, we've got these 9 individuals with these organizations organized into 3 panels. I'll introduce them as we go, each of them representing different kind of levels of organization. So the first panel will be on national players, national funding sources, and state level funding sources and programs. The second is really the municipal actors and what some of you are doing in these 3 locales around the Kansas City metro area. And then finally, we have a panel that I'm calling kind of informally the creators, which is folks who are designing or building housing in Kansas City metro area, and kind of from their perspective, what's happening with respect to older housing, folks in their homes. So the last panel at the end of the day is everybody together. We're going to have a kind of a round robin, really trying to answer the question, okay, what can we do now? What to do about this? And we hope that you can contribute all of your questions, especially to that final panel. So you can, in your chat section on your screens there, enter questions. We have a crack team of folks who will be fielding those And we'll be turning those around and then asking questions of individual presenters and also perhaps some to the group at large. And so please put your questions in the chat and we can turn those around for the last session. We also have a lot of resources we've compiled that relate to the content areas of each of these presentations and these presenter organizations. They'll all be made available to you all through Mark after the session's over in the days or weeks following. But I'll kick off. I'll kind of start by sharing what I think are housing issues for older adults from my perspective. And I invite you to comment and ask questions about that as well. So let's see if I can get rolling there. Oh, yes, there's the questions for chat. There we go. So Kathy nicely set the stage regarding the demographics. It's enormously impactful all over Kansas and Missouri and in the Kansas City metro area, as well as around the country. And older adults, as we know, live everywhere. We live in all kinds of homes and housing, from single-story old wood clapboard homes, wood frame, to the ubiquitous brick ranch style homes, which we have thousands of in North Carolina. I'm sure you do in that area as well. To, let me see if I can move this now, to maybe 2 or 3 families, duplexes or triplexes, which we like actually as affordable housing option, to maybe the ever popular, increasing popular row homes, multi-story row homes. What's in common about all these places and all the other kinds of housing that's out there for the most part is that none of them were designed for older. Sets up a very, whoops. My screen sharing is paused. Hang on. What do we got? Are we okay?
Richard, it's a blank screen.
For how long?
About a minute or so.
Ooh. All right.
Can you stop your share and then to share again?
I will try to do that. My visuals matter. What are we seeing now?
We're seeing 2 a house and business or apartment complex development.
Okay, terrific. So so as I was saying, all these homes and most of the rest of the homes that we're aging in don't really accommodate us as we grow older. And combined with the demographics of that Kathy shared earlier, we've got some real problems, as you can see, with our housing situation that's emerging and growing over the years. So we have older adults, and especially the emerging older adult population, that 50 to 65-year-old age group, which is so crucial in making some of these advanced planning housing decisions. We're all living in homes that either now or very soon won't be able to accommodate us safely going forward. And you're experiencing this, I'm sure, in every single community that you represent, all the folks who are on the call today. So what older households face, unfortunately, is limited alternatives for the most part. When they look around, let's say they want to consider moving to maybe a newly built housing community, a lot of the new construction options that may be out there now, not very viable. Most of the new housing which is being built now, with some exceptions, age-targeted communities and some multifamily, simply don't have age-friendly features either. So they're looking around, they're not finding much in that area. And because we're so hidebound and culturally we're not kind of attuned to this, we don't plan ahead for our housing futures. So we don't do much advanced planning for things like the remodeling of our kitchen, if we're redoing our kitchen for the big last remodel, or a bathroom or an addition or something like that. So we don't do much in advance of problems happening to help ourselves out. And that's really an issue for all of us as we grow older. Yes, so I think it really is kind of a hair on fire urgency. Older adults, I kind of characterize it as a quiet crisis. We older adults don't, picket City Hall because we don't have a handrail on both sides of our stairs. But those kinds of absences in our housing makes them much less safe for us and causes all kinds of problems for us going forward. So aging in place is the thing that a lot of us refer to. That's probably the biggest phrase that folks think about when they think about housing. I'm not so fond of it. It kind of restricts our thinking too much, but aging successfully in place is really what we're all about. And the housing type that we live in can make a big difference in our ability to do that, regardless of age, income, or ability level. Even this guy, who looks like he's trying to take care of himself, is going to need some accommodations in his house growing older. It's hard to avoid some of the age-related issues. But I think that probably a more useful way to think about all this, given the fact that we may need to look outside of our home for some of the housing choices that may best suit us, is to think of it in terms of aging in community. Yeah, aging in our house if we can, but if not, think about other housing options which may work out for us well. So we offer universal homes and housing and universal design as an opportunity for the housing we're thinking about for older adults. Here's just some of the characteristics. I'll go through these quickly. We need them to be high function, certainly a higher function than the traditional housing that we're living in now that's being built in most places. We like to think of them as really emphasizing the livability of the home. Think particularly not just visitability, but livability. And we know that if you're successful in building a universal home, one that's by definition also age-friendly, you've also got a house that's marketable to a broad cross-section of the housing buyers, housing marketplace. If you haven't been able to create a house that's indistinguishable from other homes in those important ways, you probably haven't been successful at creating a universal outcome. So they're high function, plus they're appealing to a wide range of folks. We know that folks who live in these kinds of homes can often delay moves to expensive care settings for months or years longer, saving lots of money. We know that folks who live in universal housing have fewer injuries, both to individuals and to their caregivers, whether paid or unpaid. And we know that not just physical health is improved as a result of this kind of housing, but also mental health, because we can retain or regain these activities of meaning and purpose, which matter so much in our mental health as we go forward. And finally, they offer us choice and interdependence, not just the independence, dependence kind of paradigm, but it's the interdependence that all of us really exist in with respect to our families and our social network going forward in time, which means as much as anything else, the choice that we have and when we choose to have people come in to help us, how frequently and what kinds of activities that we ask them to help with. So our choice and interdependence is really an important feature living in these kinds of homes as well. So it doesn't matter what the household composition is. Maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 older individuals. It might be an older couple helping each other out. It might be a beautiful family of models that's intergenerational. We live intergenerational living as a housing model. And even the Rolling Stones, who are now deep into their 70s and 80s. And now -1, we know Charlie Watts passed away last year, but the rest of them are still there and still going strong. I wonder if any of their homes have universal design features. All of us are growing old, and we all need some of these problems. So we start out with probably the classic circumstance, right? An older couple climbing stairs is one of the real problems, both inside and out in our homes. And we need to have accommodations to that, either on a retrofit basis or even better in new construction. But this is certainly one of the problem areas that we look at. But we know that the kind of features we're talking about benefit a wide range of folks. We know that even younger households with kids and bicycles and skateboards and laundry baskets and shopping carts and so on all can use the step-free entries that are particular to universal housing. Or maybe the dad in that family has gone out and tried to be a weekend warrior a little bit too vigorously and comes back with what happens in many, many households over the years, temporary issues, which cause lots of turmoil and upset while they're being dealt with, but are much less impactful if you've got a universal house to be living in. Or maybe the baby carriage in that family for years at a time having to be hauled up and down stairs, inside and out, that won't be necessary if you live in a house with a step-free entrance. Or maybe the temporary disability reflected by a woman in her later months of pregnancy. A lot of you may have been in this kind of circumstance, having to climb stairs for the 50th time that day. Or maybe it's a family member who does have a permanent disabling condition, who can take advantage of these things with relatively small levels of customization to their homes. UD houses also work well for them. So households of all types and varieties and all kinds of activities, from circumstantial to temporary health problems. But how about the everyday activities by our families and household members, or even others, right? So you can't see maybe in this picture, this is a mover with a smile on his face because he doesn't have to haul that heavy washer upstairs getting into the house. They will love you for the home that you have that doesn't require stairs to get in. So, okay, so what are we talking about? So we love step-free entrances. We can have stairs as well, as this house does, but a graded entry is really best. We know the ramps are unavoidable in many circumstances, but in new construction, we really want to have people emphasize some kind of graded entrance through the front door, through a side door, possibly even through an attached garage. But you have, it arrives at a level that's level with the first floor. In this case, the porch is level with the first floor of this house. And it has a porch roof overhang, which we find to be so beneficial for so many folks, helping avoid water infiltration at the doorway, but as well as protecting the folks coming and going from rain and snow and inclement weather of various kinds. Inside the house, in this very quick tour I'm giving you, you need to have circulation paths that work better for more people. So a path of travel that's wide enough, hallways that are wide enough, and door openings that are also wide enough. If we might need, or someone in our household might need to use particular kinds of mobility equipment going forward in time, design those in, renovate those in, build those in at the front end, and you're going to be creating a much more accommodating house going forward. And how about curbless showers in bathrooms? There's a lot to say about bathrooms, but one key feature in at least one bathroom of every house we think needs to be something like a curbless shower that has no threshold, that has bars you can add when you need to for more safety, and it's very flexible for a lot of people to bathe in that way. And moving into kitchens, also a lot to say about them, but just quickly, reaching down is a real problem for a lot of us. And these base cabinets that have doors on them, not very helpful. So having, even as a retrofit, which we have in my house, slide out shelves in base cabinets, and you can be a lot more expensive with all kinds of other storage options, helps limit the amount of bending that we need to do, avoiding us being off balance or reaching for the common everyday things in our kitchens. Or microwaves, which are hugely problematic for a lot of folks, being located, as they most often are, above the stove or the range, right? Too high for a lot of us, pulling hot things out of the tops of these. And I know that, one of the unfortunate realities is that we shrink as we get older. So what might have been okay 30 years ago may not be so okay at age 75 or beyond. So finding other locations for simple, basic things like microwaves can make a big difference. This also applies to dwellings of really any size and any price point. Obviously, you can be more full-featured as you move up the price scale and the size scale, but even things like accessory dwellings, which we really like as an option for a lot of communities in accommodating older adults, you can get the basic functionality that we're talking about, even in dwellings of this size, including a usable bathroom. And I'll point out, this is a nice bathroom with an outswinging door that really doesn't need to be the size that it is. Because of that outswinging door and this curbless shower, you might have been able to squeeze that and make it even smaller, and therefore more accommodating in the other spaces in the house. But yeah, so any kinds of home renovation or new construction of any size, it can work out well. So finally, in this section, I'll just summarize by saying that there are individual household benefits. We think there are also community benefits that accrue. Continuity of residence and a residence, we think is important. We think that maintaining multi-generational households and neighborhoods is a real advantage. We've heard of people talking about even the public safety advantages from that. The neighborhoods don't just empty out during the day, but they have folks who are there all day long, keeping eyes on the street. And so we know this is a a very useful thing for a lot of neighborhoods. So there's lots of reasons for this, but these are just some of them. We know that if you can maintain people in their homes or to the kind of housing we're talking about today, you're providing an affordable housing option, maybe for older adults now, maybe for others later. Affordable housing in general is a huge topic. Stability of tax base, maybe increased tax base is also possible by maintaining people in multi-generational communities. We know that in terms of services and budgets also, if people are living in homes that accommodate them more appropriately, we have less reliance on emergency room services, on EMS services, and home delivered meal services. And I think in COVID times, particularly, that less reliance on the healthcare system and the frontline service providers can make a big difference. So benefits all the way along, from individuals to the communities as well. Just a very quick review of this. So that's the end of my opening remarks, and we'll move into the first panel, which, as I promised, is really about kind of federal and state level programs and funding. And I'll start off by talking about some of those programs that I'm familiar with. We appreciate any comments you might have about that and other topics in the chat. And then I'll be followed by Alyssa Ice from the Kansas Housing Research Corporation and Michael Ziegler from the Missouri Housing Development Corporation, speaking about the important role that these housing finance agencies have in funding affordable housing and providing accommodating housing for older adults in the Kansas City metro area. So this is, I'm going to flip into here. So affordable housing from HUD. HUD is obviously a huge player in affordable housing of all kinds everywhere in the country, no less so for older adults. I'm mentioning vouchers now essentially to kind of put them to one side. Vouchers are a big deal with HUD and a big deal in local communities. I haven't seen them play any kind of a significant role in actually producing or maintaining appropriate housing designs for older adults. And so that's why they matter, but in terms of providing housing that works better for older adults, perhaps not such a big player. Public housing, obviously a major player for many, many decades in this country. What I know of is that in terms of public owned housing by local communities, the number is something like 40% less now than we had, maybe even less than that, 40 or 50 years ago. So that number has gone down as vouchers have gone up, which is a little bit of a shame, because with publicly owned housing in local communities, you have more of an opportunity to create kind of accommodating housing styles and designs, which is a good thing, which we know we just have too little of. So we like that. I'm not sure where you're at in the Kansas City metro area with respect to public housing, but we encourage all of it to become, through new construction, if that even happens anymore, and renovation opportunities to create more appropriate housing styles. There's two programs that may now be completely moribund. I searched hard before talking to you for evidence of a lot of robust activity with the 811 project, which has been around for a long time for people with disabilities, or the 202 program, which was around for older adults, and can't find any. Maybe you know of some activities in the Kansas City metro area, which I haven't been able to uncover. They were okay. They're producing multifamily housing, these particular housing styles. They may have been supplanted, perhaps happily, by funding and activities from your housing finance agencies. We'll hear more about that in a little while. But that may be a throwback mention there. And of course, the low-income housing tax credits, again, funneled through and managed by your housing finance agency, is an enormous player in creating a multifamily and affordable housing, including for older adults. And I know both of the states in the Kansas City metro area. So they matter a lot. And home and community development block grants have been kind of two of the biggest players in this area for a long, long time. I know that HUD really likes kind of using them in concert. They have different features and different aspects to them. They're not the same, but using them in combined is kind of what HUD has in mind. Maybe this happens in your area as well. Of course, rental housing, that includes folks with older adults as well, and the good kind of age-friendly features. There's a lot of that, encouraging home ownership in a variety of ways, and home rehabilitation also. is a major players in this area. You probably use these for those in the Kansas City metro area, as well as for the infrastructure kinds of activities that I know the block grants can be so important in helping to revitalize existing communities, to make them all kind of more viable for families and households to live in and maintain in. So that's the home in the CDBG area. Again, folks on the call and in the audience may know a lot about what's happening specific to your area. But continuing, Department of Agriculture, also a major player in rural areas. I'm not sure how close into the metro area of Kansas City USDA programs impact, perhaps on the fringes of what we might consider to be Kansas City metro, or more, but they have a lot of programs. I'll mention 3 of them. There's the 502 program that's direct to households for building and repairing for purchase loans. The 504 program, again, direct to consumers for rehab, both loans and grants. And also multifamily financing for those projects in rural areas. Again, these may be available in certain segments in and around the Kansas City metro area that you could take advantage of. So continuing to kind of less permanent kinds of funding in some respects, ARPA funds are out there. You may have already claimed all of them and then some in all the planning that's been done in the metropolitan area. I know in some places they've used it as pump priming or additional resources for housing. I'd encourage that. And we know that, whoops, I've got my sequence is out. I'll skip down to this CRA. I was intending to talk about that last. Let me see if I'll go up here. There we go. I'll just go down the list. So the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed last year, not directly impactful on housing, of course, but also could be part of these infrastructure improvements that could maintain and improve housing as a result in particular areas. I like federal home loan banks. I think they're still operating in this manner. They're always interested in creative lending and creative housing projects. And you may use them maximally in the Kansas City metro area. If so, terrific. Use more of them to create more usable housing for older adults is my recommendation. And finally, in this list, it's helping local commercial banks meet their obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act, which demands that they think creatively, lend creatively, especially to low and moderate income households in a variety of communities. This could also be turned to housing activities and special kinds of funding and financing around creating better affordable housing, and especially, of course, for older adults. I'm doing such a good job that I have, I'm kind of ahead of my time, which is good, which means that we're going to have to rely on Alyssa to come up with the middle part of this first panel. Alyssa's from the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. She does a great job. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Am I going to do that? Yes, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to bow out if I can. There we go. And I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa. Thank you so much for being here. We have given you all of 5 minutes or so. I've given you a little more now, so be appreciative. Welcome, Alyssa, and thanks.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks everyone. It's so exciting to see so many people on this call. So unfortunately, though, I do have to tell you, Richard, that I am a fast talker and I don't generally take more time than I am given.
Darn.
So I'm going to have to rely on somebody else to do that. So my name is Alyssa, like I mentioned, and I'm the Housing Development Director for KHRC. And so in our department, we do the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. We have the home funds, the National Housing Trust Fund money, and then we also do the home ARP. We're ramping that up right now. We also have the Moderate Income Housing Program. While it's not going to be available to many people on this call, I thought I would mention it as kind of a good vehicle when I was talking to Richard about this. I think a couple months ago, we talked about the benefits of this program. So, oh, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. In our LIHTC space, we do a lot of senior developments, and we really stress the importance of accessibility for those projects. We do a lot of the fourplexes with the accessible entrances, and then of course the elevator buildings. One of the things that I wanted to just touch on, with the home ARP program, while not, it doesn't really tie into this, the accessibility and the universal design discussion. It is an interesting thing that HUD is starting to do. And I just keep talking about this because it is really exciting in the housing space. You know, HUD has always said, you know, what can we do to make a deal successful? You know, we have to look at these, we have to, you know, underwrite these deals to make sure that they're going to cash flow for the 20 years and make sure that the rents, you know, meet these limits. But with home ARP, HUD is asking us, what does it take to house these very vulnerable populations in our communities? And, you know, for home ARP, we're talking about those at risk of homelessness and are homeless. But it's a really nice shift in thinking about what, you know, who are we housing and what does it take to safely, securely, affordably house them? And so I like the shift in thinking and the shift in our discussions and what we're doing with the funds that we have available. For the MIH program, I wanted to just, it used to be a very small program, used to be $2 million a year, but the state granted us significantly more funds this year. And it is a community-driven program where we allocate funds to city or county governments, and they work to meet their housing needs. And so it can be a wide array of things. But the funds have to be allocated to communities less than 60,000. So it's not available to Lenexa, Overland Park, KCK, Lawrence, but it is available to those outside suburbs. And of course, the small communities that are 60,000 or less as a whole county. But it really asks communities to meet their own needs. And we have a lot of situations, we have a lot of communities, especially out in Western Kansas, where they have built small duplexes. We have many communities where they build one duplex. And what that does is it's an accessible unit. They see a lot of older individuals move into these units. And then, you know, for the community, it also frees up those units to be sold, where we have towns that haven't, you know, these 2 units may be the only new construction that has happened in 5 or 6 years. And so it really gets that real estate market moving, and it also allows families to stay, and it also allows older individuals to stay. That idea of aging in place, especially within the community. You know, people don't want to leave their town, but they can't live in their, you know, their 3-story, 2-story townhome farm home with the bathroom on the 2nd floor. And so it's a really nice program that really kind of meets those needs. It is also open to, you know, accessory dwelling units. I know Richard and I talked about that a couple months ago. So want to note that is a possibility. Again, the community just has to talk about what they want, and they need to have a plan, and we can support that with those funds. I just wanted to touch on some of the things that Richard, you mentioned, the 811. I think that program has shifted. It's now like states are awarded 811 funds to increase accessibility. Kansas does not have those funds, so I cannot speak to it any more than that. For 202s and USDA, you know, LIHTC is oftentimes called in to help rehab those units to keep them online, because they are huge assets to communities, to our seniors, and I mean the residents in the rural areas. And so LIHTC is often utilized to keep those online. I wanted to make 2, or actually 3 really quick plugs. One is the state of Kansas does something really, really cool. It's the Housing Interagency Council. It's where KHRC, a representative from USDA Rural Development, a representative from Federal Home Loan Bank, and a representative from Commerce. We all get together and we meet with communities to talk about the housing funds that we have available for them. It is a really nice way where a community can come and talk about what they see, and we can kind of tailor, you know, this program will work for you, this program won't work for you. Oh, you should make sure you talk to this person, or that we've seen a lot of success in there. So that's a really cool thing that we do, and it does seem to be pretty helpful to the communities. I have to mention that we did the housing assessment. And so it said what we all already know, that we need housing, we need all types of housing, but really want to stress looking at that. And then finally, the housing conference. KHRC does a really wonderful housing conference, and it will be in Wichita at the end of this month, and it's going to be in person. There's also a virtual component, but it's a really good opportunity to talk about these issues, especially with people who are dealing with them also. So with that, I think that's my time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alyssa. I hope people were rapidly taking notes. And if they, you did a great job of quickly moving through because we didn't give you much time. But that was wonderful. I'm sure we'll have questions for you at the end, and I'm glad you can hang around for that. Next up, we have Michael Ziegler, who's an architect with Missouri Housing Development Corporation, and he's got actually just a couple slides, and so we'll throw those up, and I'll welcome you, Michael. You can start while they're getting that sorted out.
All right, thank you, Richard. Good morning. My name is Michael Ziegler. I'm the staff architect for the Missouri Housing Commission, or MHDC. And I'd like to start off with a brief background of MHDC. MHDC was originally established in 1969 and works to provide quality, safe, affordable housing for low and moderate income citizens of Missouri. And MHDC administers and provides financing for the construction of affordable housing. The commission also provides funding for home loans to qualified first-time buyers through a network of certified private mortgage lenders. Mortgage financing is facilitated through the sale of mortgage-backed securities and through the sale of tax-exempt bonds that the commission is authorized to issue. Next slide. So part of MHDC's construction requirements, this is for new construction, we require universal design. So we incorporate these 7 principles for new construction developments, and those include equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space for approach and use. And typically for new construction development, this will be for multifamily, seniors. This is required. So every new construction project, we expect to see universal design standards incorporated. Next slide. These universal design requirements are included in Exhibit D of our Form 1200, which is our design and construction compliance guidelines. And this document can be accessed at the link provided on the slide. It'll be pages 22 through 24 of the document. And please be advised that the MHDC website is being upgraded currently. So some of these documents aren't immediately accessible on the website if you're kind of browsing around. So just keep that in mind with that link. Next slide. The majority of MHDC developments consist of multifamily and senior living units. Typically, we see your standard duplex and fourplex buildings. Sometimes triplexes also come through in applications, and we consider those as well. Although single family developments are less common, they can be awarded additional points under our 2021 QAP in the tenant ownership category. And this is something that's been recently established in our QAP. And the last item on that I wanted to talk about here, condos and coop style ownerships, they're not eligible under IRS Section 42. So that's just something to be mindful of as well when submitting applications to MHDC. Next slide. So our funding resources, the primary MHDC resources include LIHTC, Home, Housing Trust Fund. We also see AHAP funding for specific developments. And the resources historically, they've been kind of divided. It's been a 50-50 split between family and senior occupancy developments. And currently, neither type of development is incentivized over the other. So we typically see You know, it's split right down the middle. We're not really seeing a trend necessarily yet in the applications that we receive for additional senior housing. But it's something that we will definitely keep a watch on in the future. Different geographical and demographical areas throughout the state of Missouri have more need for family senior units, and those are reflected in the applications and awards given every year. So we do evaluate applications submitted by region in Missouri. Typically, there's 3 major regions: Kansas City region, St. Louis region, and what we call the outstate regions, which is basically everywhere else in the state. And so all of our funding is allocated accordingly based on region. And currently, LIHTC, home, HTF resources are not used to develop accessory dwelling units on an owner-occupied single-family property. So that's another item to be mindful of. Next slide. And I suppose that's all that I have for this morning. So I just wanted to thank you all for having me.
Michael, thank you so very much. That was a terrific coverage of what you all do there. And I'm sure folks have questions. I see we have a lot of activity in the chat. I encourage you to go on there and post questions and to engage each other. Again, we'll be culling some of those for our Q&A part at the end of our time together. All right, so that's our first panel. We've talked about national funding sources and these major affordable housing players in Missouri and Kansas City, in Kansas. And now we move on to kind of municipal actors at that level. So we have 3 major players who are doing very interesting things or seeing very interesting things on the local level in the Kansas City metro area. We'll start off with Erin Wynn, who is, I believe her current title is Assistant City Manager for Roland Park. And she'll talk about some of the activities that they've been engaged in recently. So welcome, Erin. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, so the city of Roland Park, for those that are not familiar, is a small suburb, kind of right outside the downtown Kansas City area. We've got a population of 6,700-ish, 1.6 square miles. So we are small and built out. So impetus for some of our work around universal design was really our involvement in Mark's Community for All Ages programming and wanting to respond in a way that fit the needs of our residents and our kind of unique built environment. So our city has implemented a universal design incentive policy. So this is an optional program that allows folks that are doing any sort of residential new build, which we don't see a lot of, and remodel, which we do see some of, to apply for waivers for their building permits and fees if they incorporate aspects of universal design into the product. So we intentionally made that broad and our definitions of accessible because we wanted to cast a wide net for all sorts of improvements that folks could make, particularly since it's not mandatory, it's an invitation. The goal, I think, eventually is to use this as a proof point, right? Like, here is what is possible. Here is what the market can support. You know, here is what our residents want. Something that we're working on now is making that connection between universal design and affordability. Because while I do think, you know, the cost of building permits could be a barrier to folks making these improvements, we know that likely some fixed income, other economic realities are posing additional barriers to folks being able to make these improvements to their homes. So we're exploring now, how do we work with other partners in the area? How do we tap into funding sources that allow folks to make these modifications and continue to improve our community as a desirable place to age in place? I think I'm well for my time, but I'll turn it back over to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you so much, Erin. I'm really happy to hear that you're proceeding with that. I wish we could come back to you in 5 years. We'll find out what happened. Like a lot of the other things we're talking about, some of these are new, right? These are not going back a long time. So we really appreciate the innovative thinking that you're all doing in Roland Park. And that was a great job and very good time. So we're going to move on. Our second presenter in this kind of municipal context is Leslie Herring, who herself comes from Westwood, Kansas. And you'll have to remind us, I think, of your new title, Leslie.
Well, it's not new yet. The city council, we just changed form of government that just passed a couple weeks ago. So we will be a city administrator council form of government, or are, I guess. I just haven't been technically appointed to that position yet. That will
Okay,
happen
all
at
right.
some point this month. So my title is actually Chief Administrative Officer and City Clerk for the
Very
city of
good.
Westwood. Thank
Okay.
you, Richard.
Yeah.
So I've been here the last 2 years, and in the last year here in Westwood, we've really made some interesting strides on this topic. And I think I was originally invited by Kathy and Richard to present to you all today, primarily to talk about our allowance of ADUs now by right in the single family residential zone. However, I will cover a couple other things that have played into our allowing that to occur, and also some of the things that we are doing in addition to that, and what the future looks like for us in terms of policy making and decisions, long-term decisions that the elected officials will be making. So we are, and I'll give you a really quick snapshot of our demographic situation as well, like Aaron did for Roland Park. Roland Park is actually our neighbor to the west. We share a border with them, Mission Road, in between 53rd and 47th Street. We in Westwood are the absolute furthest you can get and stay in Johnson County, in Northeast Johnson County. So our northern border is Wyandotte County, and our eastern border is Missouri, Jackson County, Kansas City, Missouri. We have about 1,750 people who live here right now, and we are just under half a square mile in area. So we are very small. We are completely built out. So all new development is redevelopment here. And our median age is about 36, and we are about 80% owner occupied. However, that number does include 90 units at the Woodside Village apartment complex on 47th and Rainbow. So we are primarily single family residential homes, and we are absolutely seeing the tear down and rebuild that has happened in Prairie Village and some of the other communities here around us. But we are also seeing quite a few pretty large major additions onto homes as well. So that's a little bit about who we are in Westwood, if you aren't familiar with us. What we're seeing and what kind of led us to this conversation about updating our zoning ordinance, really, we did wholesale updates this year. It was we've been working on it since really since I got here 2 years ago, but we wrapped it up at the end of 2021 and adopted the new zoning ordinance in the beginning of 2022. But what we are seeing with regard to this conversation is an interest from property owners of all ages to have ADUs be allowed in the city. We have had some that were operating non-conforming before we allowed them, but now they can have them by right in the single family residential home. All the ADUs that we are seeing so far, and we do have just a handful, fewer than 10, are ADUs that are above a detached 2-car garage. That is primarily what we are seeing. Actually, I think we have 1 or 2 that are standalone. And so that is kind of what we were seeing, was just this ground swell of interest from, frankly, the elected officials and planning commissioners as well, to allow their neighbors to do this, but to have ADUs be allowed, and also that they would be allowed to be inhabited. We did have a provision in our zoning ordinance before that is now no longer there, that the accessory dwelling units cannot be inhabited. And so they can now, and that is, again, by right in the single family residential zone. So we also started engaging with Kathy and our city council president to look at the Communities for All Ages program here in Westwood. There's been interest for a long time, it seems, in engaging in that program. I think maybe there were some limitations with staff or limitations with the capacity of the elected officials to really meaningfully engage in participating in that program until I got here in this position. So this year we are pursuing bronze level certification, and a component of that is a community survey. We had our survey open this past month. It just closed last Friday, and we found a couple interesting things that will not be surprising to any of you. Richard actually already touched on a couple of the items that stood out to me that I wanted to share with you today. So there is an absolute interest from residents to stay in the community, but they aren't seeing the housing products that they would foresee themselves moving into to stay in the community. There does seem to be a little bit of a push and pull between whether they would prefer the community housing stock to continue looking the way it does and not to add new different styles of housing. And there's a conflict and a tension, it seems, between what they are interested and willing to see. And then there's also one of the findings was that bathroom remodels and no-step entries were the top home improvements that the survey respondents communicated to us that they would want to see in order to allow them to remain in their homes. We also have had interest from the private market to provide more housing options here in Westwood. And so, and we've also had interest from the elected and appointed officials, so primarily our city council and our planning commission, to be forward thinking and responsive and adapted to the community's needs and what the community is sharing that they want. So one of the things that we did last year, it's been about a year ago now, just under, we engaged the Urban Land Institute of Kansas City to do a technical assistance panel for us. And one of the 3 questions that we had them look at were our housing products and if there are different typologies that we would be able to integrate here into Westwood to accommodate future needs and desires of the community. And so that was great. And one of the things that they came up with was, hey, update your zoning ordinance. And so what we did with that was we went to Jennifer, thank you, Jennifer Reinhardt at IBTS, and said, hey, Jennifer, can you help us take a look at the Urban Land Institute's report and our zoning ordinance and figure out ways that we could integrate these 2 things together? And she was extremely helpful in doing that and leading a subcommittee of our Planning Commission and City Council through that process. And with her help, we incorporated additional red lines into the zoning ordinance to better accommodate diverse housing typologies. We also have updated, or we are looking to update our comprehensive plan as well. And that would come on the heels of, we've created a work plan for the Planning Commission, kind of an annual monthly understanding of what types of things might come on the agenda to continue the Planning Commission's work to be forward thinking about and intentional about planning for Westwood. And so there will be a joint meeting of the City Council and Planning Commission actually next Wednesday. And one of the things that they will be talking about are possible updates to the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. Even though we just did that, we want to get into a good cadence and rhythm of making sure that we touch those documents and are intentional about their contents and whether or not they are doing for our community what those officials want them to do for us. And then we also are in the midst of a facilities study right now. So we've hired Multi-Studio, formerly Gould Evans, to look at our public buildings and spaces, including our parks, and including some land that the city either has the option to purchase or currently owns, to find out if any of those would be good spaces for either new city facilities to then free up more I guess, parcels that are more attractive to the private sector that could help us diversify our tax base for future proofing Westwood, and then also looking at those parcels of land. It's about 10 acres or so, all cobbled together, to look at possibly using those as sites for different types of housing options that we might look at integrating based on these studies that we've done. And then we've also started working with the UCS of Johnson County, the United Community Services, and we're working with them, with Aaron over in Roland Park, as well as a couple other Northeast Johnson County cities, to evaluate strategies to help people maintain already existing affordable housing stock, which we have quite a bit of here in Westwood, and to integrate the Universal Design Playbook. Part of that work will be to get people like Aaron and me into a room so that I actually know that they've done this really cool program to forgive or waive building permit fees for universal design integration into homes. That's just really neat, and we can learn a lot from one another. So looking forward to continuing that work. And then we will, the final thing I'll share is that the Communities for All Ages bronze recognition is what we're seeking this year, but next year in 2023, I am working with our council president again, Jeff Harris, to look at achieving both the silver and gold recognition levels next year. And so doing that assessment and convening a task force for Communities for All Ages here to help them to understand what next steps and what the future look like for us in affordable and universal design housing. So I will stop it there.
Leslie, fantastic. What a lot you had to report on. I'm so happy to hear about that. One of my really great takeaways from this is not just an opportunity for large communities and cities to operate. This is really a space that people can be a productive actor in small communities. So you guys are you are great examples of that. So, and you've teed up Jennifer nicely. Jennifer Reinhardt is a planner, which I am as well. So we have some kindred backgrounds there. For the Institute for Building Technology and Safety, she works actively in the Kansas City metro area, as you've heard. And we're going to kind of hear from her perspective what she's seeing in places around the metro area. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Richard, and good morning, everyone. As Richard mentioned, I'm a planner. I'm a planner for IBTS. We're a national nonprofit, and we have a branch office in Kansas City, and we partner closely with Mark and other regional partners to offer shared services in planning and building inspections for communities in the Kansas and Missouri region. And so I'm going to use my 5 minutes today to focus on some of the conversations and ideas that are percolating around the region for specific tools to promote and codify universal design best practices at the municipal level. And it's my hope that everyone here joining this call can maybe find some that resonate with them and might be appropriate for your communities to then take back and advocate for, to see, again, at a technical level, ways to promote and make sure that these happen in your communities. So the first, I'll start with your building code. There is a lot of flexibility at the state level to allow each of the municipalities, if you want to adopt your building code. Michael with MHDC mentioned that, what they're doing with affordable housing units with requiring universal design features. You could actually, if you choose, amend your code to require all or perhaps a percentage of new construction or home modifications to follow certain design requirements. With that said, you could also adopt a specific universal design guideline where you can go and do a cost benefit analysis of which specific modifications make the most sense. Perhaps those that are inexpensive to do at the time of construction, but then become very expensive to do later to renovate and retrofit. You could require those certain features, or for those less expensive, you could either make those desirable or optional, and you could list those out and provide a checklist as part of your design requirements for specific developments. Aaron with Roland Park mentioned, the voluntary incentive program. Another idea is to have a certificate program, again, voluntary for developers to go through and then be awarded a certificate that then could generate a positive publicity for them. And again, a way to promote these ideas without requiring them per se. Another idea is a general consumer awareness campaign. For example, you could require every builder to provide consumers a list of universal design features. And then if the consumers would like them, then the builders, would be required to provide those features for them. But again, more of a educational campaign framework. And then going to zoning code, I know, Westwood and Leslie have been real leaders in the area with ADUs, but you could look at what's specifically in your zoning code to allow for more, I'm going to call them intermediate level housing options. So ADUs, or even cottage courts, so smaller homes surrounded by a central courtyard to promote community and could have some shared services. You could go through, so in between independent living and then facility assisted care, there's a lot of different options for housing types. So you could go through and make sure that you're friendly for these alternative options that then could incorporate universal design. You could go a step further and require universal design elements in age-restricted housing units, perhaps in specific zoning districts. Or include density bonuses or other incentives for developers who follow universal design principles. So there is a lot of flexibility and just different options within your zoning code itself to insert some of the language for universal design. And then just to do a shout out to Raymore, Missouri, because if you all aren't familiar, I would encourage you to go read. They did a Community for All master plan, which is really important because it outlines priorities, strategies, actions that include universal design, but also housing affordability and aging in place strategies. And what I think is really important with updating your master plan or making sure that specific language is in your community's comprehensive plan is it emphasizes that, housing is more than just the built environment. And there's a lot of other important aspects like access to health, transportation, weatherization, energy efficiency. And so you can start to cobble together a lot of different options to support, seniors or other people in these universally designed homes, but again, going a little outside of just the built environment itself. And when you're looking at small and rural communities, this is especially important. So I know that was a whirlwind, but I think I will cut it there and turn it back to you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so very much, Jennifer. That was fantastic. I said this in the chat, but I'll say it out loud here. I love all these panelists. You bring such important and diverse perspectives to this issue. And I know this is being recorded. I imagine that Mark will make this available afterwards. And you probably know half a dozen folks who should be seeing this and taking notes on what some of the folks are saying. I'll also remind people that we've actually got a lot of links that are showing up in the chat functions. You can go into chat now and link to some of the resources and some of the areas that folks have talked about. So that's a real added benefit. So thanks so much to everybody in that panel. Our final panel is, again, the panel I've kind of called the creator panel. These are folks who are actually can and are doing some building and renovation in the Kansas City metro area or designing it. So we'll hear from three different folks. First, Christina Leakey, who represents and runs the Truman Heritage Habitat for Humanity. And we welcome you overcoming all our technological challenges, Christina, and I'll give the floor to you.
Good morning, everyone. Christina Leakey, President and CEO of Truman Heritage Habitat for Humanity. We serve the Eastern Jackson County region of Kansas City. And so those are going to be the communities that are west of 435 and largely the bedroom communities of the Kansas City area. So a lot of housing stock that, while built quality in its day, is presenting a lot of challenge for not just the aging senior population that we serve, who has a significant demand for home repair, but also just having opportunities that Habitat is known for, creating homeownership opportunities that are going to be homes that are really built to help the homeowners age in place in the future. So Habitat is kind of taking a twofold strategy to addressing the needs of the aging housing stock and the aging population. Most people know us as the organization that builds homes from the ground up using volunteer labor, and that is still very much central to what Habitat does. In that light, we are working to incorporate universal design concepts into our new construction plans. We've always done what we can to build homes that are accessible, but going a step further, a few years back, pre-COVID, we had an opportunity to respond to a request for funding proposals that the City of Independence initiated as they were working to increase their status as a community for all ages, to propose a universal design home construction. And we have had a great deal of experience working with the City Home Funds as a community housing development organization designated since about 2008. We were a good candidate for that opportunity. We had sort of an interesting homeowner situation in that it was not a senior that we were building for, but it was a veteran who had served several tours of duty, and because of damage to her body that she experienced during that time of service, had endured over 27 different surgeries. And we knew that while she was not currently in need of a fully accessible home, the future for her is one that would certainly require that she have a home that would allow her to remain in place as her body continued to suffer the consequences of those surgeries. And so we actually employed a universal design for a young mother home. We had been given a property that was donated to us in an area that we knew would allow us to create a step-free entrance to begin with. And then we took our standard 3-bedroom Habitat home, which is about a 1,325 square foot design. And we incorporated additional changes to that plan that it would allow it to take advantage of the most universal design elements that made sense for this particular family. So those would include things like ensuring that the doorways and the hallways were wide, that they accommodated that circulation path that Richard mentioned would be so important to her having full use of her property into the future. We are fortunate that our Habitat design, our standard design, is actually pretty, is designed for an open floor plan to begin with. So that modification was fairly simple, straightforward. We did raise the height of our receptacles, our outlet receptacles, and set the light switches at a place, the 42-inch standard. There were accommodations made so that the bathrooms would be easily adapted in the future, as well as the kitchen, in case the homeowner should need a accommodations for wheelchairs. So that was all built into the walls of the structure. That is something that we, now that we have the design plan, will be able to continually look for those properties that will support that zero-step entrance and would be ideal for construction of a universal design home. So that would be an ongoing investment for our organization. What I'd really like to spend time talking about is how we have, based on the demand that we're seeing in our communities, have adapted our home preservation program investment to look closely at the aging in place opportunities that they present. So we are the beneficiary through a number of the communities that we serve of community development block grant and general funds to do home preservation activities for homeowners who most often are having a need for a critical repair that's important to preserve the home from a physical condition, code compliance standpoint, affordability standpoint, and energy efficiency, all things that are important for any homeowner, no matter what their age is. But the majority of the time, the applicants that we receive are coming to us from seniors. And so that has become a critical focus, not just for the improvements that we're making, but we are now working under the Habitat for Humanity Housing Plus model, which is one that allows us to make a greater assessment of the seniors' needs beyond just the physical conditions of the home, but the limitations that are presenting challenges for their quality of life and their health. So we are now focusing that as an opportunity for every applicant that we intake, that we can bring that level of assistance and inspection to them, and then work with housing providers and other community service agencies that can assist us in addressing those seniors' needs. Richard, I feel like I'm probably at time.
We're fine. Yeah, terrific. Thank you, Christina. That was great. I think you have lessons for other habitats to learn from with the great stuff that you're doing there. Thank you so much. Next on this last panel is Scott Roseman, who's an architect and a leader in the firm of Roseman Architecture. Like so many of the other panelists I think that Scott has forgotten more about affordable housing than the rest of us will ever know. And so he's going to talk to us for a couple of minutes about what they do and what they see in this area. Thank you, Scott. Take it away.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to Mark for organizing this. I appreciate everyone's time this morning. Again, I'm Scott Roseman with Roseman & Associates. We're an architecture firm headquartered here in Kansas City. We also have offices in St. Louis, Denver, and Atlanta. One thing that we think sets us apart as a design firm is multifamily housing is not just a piece of our work or a certain studio. It's really all that we do. So we were founded in 1987, and since that time have focused on multifamily housing almost exclusively. For us, that takes a couple of verticals. It's traditional market rate apartments, both suburban walk-ups as well as urban infills. We've got a couple of exciting projects here in the Kansas City metro. A multifamily garden style project in Belton, and a 10 and 11 story high rise just near Chicken and Pickle. So we really cover the broad width of what multifamily housing is. We're also very active in the affordable and workforce housing. We think that is an amazing program. We're really big fans of the LIHTC credits as well as the HUD programs. And we think that it does an amazing job of creating teams to produce housing. It's been really interesting to watch housing as a word change in the last decade. Coming out of the 2008, 2009 recession, I think it forced a lot of people, whether they knew it or not or wanted to admit it or not, to take a step back and say, how are we living? What does housing look like in all of our communities, big communities, small communities, and that has only accelerated from what we see and from what our clients, who are predominantly private developers, are looking at and considering. We also do some student housing, so private developer-driven student housing, as well as mixed-use commercial housing. And I think that's another place as governments and cities and neighborhoods look at revising comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. Mixed-use commercial housing together is absolutely a trend that we are seeing in our day-to-day business. Universal design for us is really pretty interesting because we as designers, as architects, are so fixed on complying with the building code. Did we meet the building code? And so when someone brings up things like universal design principles and ideas, and there's no checklist, right, to say, yes, we did it, no, we didn't, yes, we did, yes, we did. It's really fun, to be honest, as designers, to get a set of concepts and principles and say, how can we use these design ideas in a manner that does not create additional costs, but provides a better living environment? To some of the examples that Christina just made, outlet heights. The building code gives you a range, and everybody wants to put them at the very minimum of the range because they can say, hey, yeah, we complied. But is that really the best place for the outlet? Scooting an outlet up 12 inches, maybe some electrician would argue that it costs more, but it really doesn't. but does it create a better living environment? That's a great example. We spend a lot of our time looking at hallways inside a unit, hallways in a building, in a complex. For our developers, hallways are square footage that they charge rent for, but don't do anything, right? No resident walks in through a home or through an apartment or even a senior living facility and says, man, these are the best hallways I've ever seen. So how do we get rid of them entirely? That is universal design. If you don't have to worry about the width of a hall because you've minimized them on a project, that's amazing. When it comes to doorways, is there a way to create privacy without a door? If so, you have created a much more universal living. You've created a living place where not just those that need an accommodation are happier, but everyone is happier. I'm sure we've all walked into a lot of floor plans and said, hey, this really just flows well. This really feels well. This space is one I can envision myself living in and being really happy. That is universal design from our point of view. So as designers, as design partners at government, at jurisdiction, it's finding ways in our point of view, especially right now with construction costs and labor costs and general development costs, as difficult to get projects to make sense as they can. We really try to show our clients the economic benefits of good design decisions. And good design decisions apply to efficient and effective designs. It applies to universal design. It applies to material selection, but specifically to universal design, to kind of try to stay on topic here today. How do we show the economics of universal design? And I think if we can all work together to figure out that answer, to take to developers who at the end of the day produce a majority of our housing, and to show them better returns that they can take to their investors, because a new facility that has universal design is going to hold value. It's going to appeal to a wider market base. How do we show residents that show up at comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance meetings that your communities, all of our communities, are better because of diverse housing options? If we can prove that it makes cities healthier, like we know it does, to everyone, that I think is that's how we create true housing, which was mentioned earlier, right? Housing is a lot more than my four walls. It really is community building. And so I think, especially as it comes to universal design, that's something that we strive hard to do every day.
Thank you, Scott. That's thought-provoking and certainly a conversation starter for later discussions about this. Our final panelist in this segment comes from Marlboro, and it's Rebecca McQuillan, who's the executive director of the land trust there. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. You were last and certainly not least.
I will take my duties of keeping enough time for question and answers at the end very seriously. So I'll do a quick overview. So as you said, my name's Rebecca McQuillan. I'm the executive director of the Marlboro Community Land Trust, which is a community land trust operating in Kansas City, Missouri. Currently, we are working in one neighborhood, but we look to hopefully expand that into something that can serve the entire region. So our work with universally designed housing is primarily focused initially around affordability. But we are seeing as kind of, and we sought to create housing that was affordable for low income people to buy, to own, to build wealth with, to build their community in, and have seen a high demand from a lot of retired senior individuals, and are so looking to try to implement other aging in place models that community land trusts throughout the country are using to try to meet that demand. So a quick kind of high level 30-second overview of a community land trust, if for those who are not familiar, is a community land trust acquires property and develops it. Primarily, we focus primarily on single family housing. So I'll use that as an example. Redevelop a house, include subsidies in it, whether it's CDBG funds or home funds, or if we are able to leverage foundation grants, PRIs, into the house to make it be affordable, and we sell the house at a below market affordable rate to a qualifying home buyer. Sell only the house and retain title to the land and hold it in trust for future low-income homeowners. And there's a ground lease between the homeowner and the community land trust as the landowner that governs the relationship between the parties. And basically, among many other things, it's like a 60-page document. So one of the things includes that the subsidies and benefits that were poured into the land to make it be affordable for a low-income homeowner, they stay with the land on sale. So the homeowner receives a share of the increase in equity, but the majority of it stays with the house, so that on the second sale and the third sale and the fourth sale, it's still affordable, and the subsidies and the grants and the foundation dollars are still serving their purpose. So one of we found our first home we sold to a 75-year-old Vietnam veteran. It was the first home he'd ever purchased, and we realized there's a large community of people who have VA benefits or Social Security benefits, disability benefits they're not high amounts, but they're really stable amounts, and they're enough to pay a mortgage on an affordable home, and they can build that wealth and use that to be able to leave the home to their grandkids or their kids. And so also with the community land trust model, as I mentioned, we try to sell the homes below market rate. So banks we have 20% below market value. They count that 20% equity as a down payment. So for example, our Vietnam veteran did not need to come up with 20% down in order to have affordable mortgage payments. That was our unrealized equity was counted towards him as his down payment. And then fortunately, his low but stable benefits covered the mortgage payments, and we have like a 41% debt to income ratio. So then he's able to own that and pass that on to his children. And so we realize as we list houses, there's a high demand of people who are retired, don't have a high income, but are wanting housing to own or wanting to relocate to a smaller home that's more affordable to them. And so we have found that we're able to serve a senior population in that. What we hope to start doing is to implement an aging in place program that's being used in community land trusts throughout the country. So as I mentioned, when we sell a house, it has to be a qualifying buyer. Some of our qualifications are at or below 80% of the area median income, and the buyer does not have more than 30% of the value of the home in assets. However, there are aging in place models that waive those requirements for a person who wants to stay in their home, wants to stay in their neighborhood, but it needs significant repairs that they cannot afford or even just like emotionally handle. So in those instances, community land trusts are purchasing the land and the home from the homeowner, selling it back to the homeowner, basically for the cost of repairs. And this homeowner otherwise wouldn't qualify because their income might be too high. But if they transfer their home into the community land trust, they are able to avoid those requirements. And then also the CLT does the renovations, sells it back to them at an affordable rate, retains the ground lease. And so then that home is now part of the community land trust and can be used in perpetuity to create affordable housing. So those are kind of two ways that community land trusts support the universally designed housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Since you were last, I will give you first crack at our short Q&A period for this. So my question to you then is you're in Kansas City. What could Kansas City do that would help you do more or do a better job at what you would like to do? Is there anything on their level that they could be helping you out more than they are now? Not that you're giving directions, but just kind of your wish list.
That's going to take the rest of the Q&A session, but I will highlight one simple thing that we are in right now is our a homeowner that I mentioned applied for, because he owns the home, and he applied for minor home repair assistance for a roof replacement, because as a CLT homeowner, you own the home, you're responsible for all of the repair as you own it. And so we are currently kind of going through the city with that, battling that, but that's a simple thing that could be used to make that more accessible to a community land trust homeowner. And the city could be sure that that roof is not going to be replaced and then flipped and sold, you know, to an investor tomorrow, that it will always, that roof would always serve a low income household. So there's
Okay.
a hot off the press example I'm working through right now.
That's great. Now, I know that Kathy has been fielding all these questions and this conversation in the chat area. And I'm wondering, Kathy, do you have maybe a particular question that's come up that you'd like to offer to the panelists to answer?
Sure. I'll start with a question for Alyssa because I know she has to hop off a couple minutes early. There was a question about how is the Housing Interagency Council structured? How long has it been in operation and what are some of the deliverables from the council?
Good question. So I don't know how long it's been in existence. It's been in existence for a long time. And it is a Department of Commerce is the one that spearheads that. And so it kind of takes two forms. One is the agencies, so USDA Rural Development, KHRC, Department of Commerce, and Federal Home Loan Bank. We, the four of us, get together fairly regularly to just talk about what our housing goals and strategies and the things that we're coming out with are, you know, how we can work together to collaborate. But then also, as communities complete a housing assessment tool, which is something that the Department of Commerce guides or has the format for, then once they complete that tool, then we schedule a meeting with the four agencies. And the agency or the city or county the community will describe their housing needs and what's going on in their community and what they're doing to address those needs. And then we will, each agency will go through all the programs that could be eligible for those communities. I think I addressed everything.
That's great. Yeah.
And
Kathy,
then
another
there were two questions that I think are aligned. How do you force or encourage builders to include some of these things in new homes they build? And then a related, what kind of training or standards of building for universal design for our developers to help them think of this as a design for their next developments?
Well, maybe the first question might be for Jennifer, who I think has a handle on kind of municipal actions. Jennifer, do you want to tackle that about the first portion of that question?
Yeah, so the first portion was just what cities can do to kind of make builders incorporate or different ways. So I think, you know, one idea, as I mentioned before, is to revise your building code so it is in there that incorporates the universal design principles. And there are, I forgot to mention earlier, there are model ordinances and checklists that have been developed in other parts of the country to use as templates to build off of. So you won't have to be building from scratch, and they have been kind of tested by, you know, industry professionals and, you know, have been vetted to provide a standard of, you know, these design principles. And then I think otherwise, yeah, and then depending on your community, you know, you don't have to be as rigid with the requirements. You know, there's incentive models or checklists, just kind of information sharing. Or I guess another idea to kind of the carrot before the stick is also, you know, the incentives, but then to perhaps have impact fees or payment in lieu of. So you could have requirements, but then another option that then could maybe go to a fund to then fund, you know, universal design, maybe home repair programs or what other panelists have been suggesting. That could be a way to kind of maybe get at both. So those are just some thoughts at the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up. Yeah, if you have specific.
Terrific. Thank you. I mean, and the second part of the question had to do with training, and I'll offer that, you know, we have a number of checklists, some of which will be in the resources that you guys get that have to do with universal design. And, you know, Mark has been doing a lot of trainings on this. We do this kind of thing also all over the country as well. So we're happy to help with that. Maybe others have other kind of educational opportunities. AAA may offer them. I know the National Association of Home Builders has some opportunities, some of which we've developed in collaboration with them. Any other informational, educational sources to learn more about this kind of stuff that people are aware of, they can offer? Nope. Okay, well, that's fine. I wish we had more time for more questions. There are a lot of them. we'll make sure we can feed back these things to you all following this thing. I want to express my deep appreciation for the wholly inadequate amount of time we offered to each of these presenters. You did a terrific job. I really appreciate the diversity of your perspectives and of the quality of your offerings in this short time that we offered you to talk to folks. I hope people appreciate that. And in closing from my end, and I'll turn it back to Kathy at the end, is just I think that this brief conversation we had this morning, as impactful as it is and as kind of dense as it is really still part of an ongoing conversation series of actions, some on the part of Mark, on the part of all of you, I think, in the audience, and certainly the panelists. It isn't ending today. This is really another step in the direction of emphasizing the importance of affordable housing for older adults and the importance of design considerations, both for the home in particular, but also, of course, in the neighborhoods and the community. So I look forward to all of your continued actions, good actions and engagement on this issue. And again, express my thanks to all the panelists and the folks who are attending. Kathy, back to you.
Great, thanks. I'd like to just also echo Richard. This was just an amazing webinar, just incredible presentations. Thank you so much. But also thanks to the 100+ who took the time today to sit in on this webinar. It was in chat. You'll get an evaluation shortly after this webinar concludes. Please let us know your thoughts and suggestions on future webinars on housing related topics and how to move the universal design needle forward, particularly like, Scott's comments about how conversations can go forward with this. So thank you so much. Please complete the survey. Thanks again to our amazing presenters and Richard, your amazing job to really move this webinar forward very quickly, but allowing everyone time to share their really wonderful information. Thanks and have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.